Hey, Lashpreneurs. I was recently asked on Instagram, what is it I've done on my healing journey at this point, I've lost 40 pounds. I'm like actively in CrossFit 4 days a week. I am the most mentally strong I've ever been. That doesn't mean that I don't face problems. They just don't tank me. I haven't been depressed in probably a year or more. I've gone through a divorce and I'm thriving. I'm financially stable and growing and leading a team of 7 team members and growing a business. So I thought, yeah, let's sit down and have a little chitter chat about that. And maybe there might be something in it for you if you find that you're just not as in a good, solid mental state as you'd like to be. And for sure, I am no stranger to the ups and downs of life. And a lot of what I initially started to learn about how to run a business and the mindset of being successful in business absolutely translated to my personal life. In fact, it's probably had more of a transformation in my personal life than it ever did in my business. So let's get to it. First and foremost, I stopped prioritizing everybody else over me. Oh, that's so hard for you people pleasers. And I am a recovering one, so I get it. I thought that my love and my importance and my worth to those that were important to me was how much I could sacrifice of myself. That very much was the case in my marriage, where I changed everything about me, prioritized every need that he had, and he was still unhappy. Because turns out, wasn't necessarily the problem. Like if somebody's unhappy with themselves, they're going to be unhappy with themselves and there's nothing that you can do about it. So when I started to prioritize my well-being over everyone else, including my children and including my family and including my ex-husband, while we were still married, that's when things really started to shift. And that's really when I started recognizing just how poorly I was being treated. And we'll get into the divorce episode someday. I've tried to record it like 17 different times and it's just not the right message yet. But there was a difference between how I started to speak to myself and my self-love journey and admiring myself and how he was treating me. So I started to develop a really strong sense of self. And then there was how he spoke to me and treated me. There was a big difference. And so when you start to set boundaries, sometimes people don't like it. And eventually boundaries means that they may lose access to you. And that's kind of what ended up happening. But yeah, prioritizing self-care. So now how I'm able to be consistent with it is specifically for me, and this kind of goes into part number 2, but I block out my calendar for me time. And it is a non-negotiable. Now, I am in a situation in my business where I have a public calendar, right? Like people can book calls with me, my team can book calls with me. So if I don't manage my calendar and my schedule, it will get taken over with calls and people needing things from me. And so I have to have boundaries in place that myself and my stuff and what's important to me to take care of my well-being comes first. And I will cancel on people and I will delay meetings and I will even cancel projects and launches if it means that I have to sacrifice the things that keep me steady and stable. So for example, on my calendar, I have gone through and just put recurring appointments on the 4 days a week that I want to work out. And those happen to be during school hours. And usually it is an hour workout. It's about a 20-minute drive there and a 20-minute drive back, and maybe a shower in there or not. But let's be real. Like sometimes I don't always shower after my workouts, but I work from home and I work alone. So I don't mind me being stinky. So there's like a 2-hour block each day. Now, this is part of the benefits of not trading my time for money, is that doesn't necessarily impact the business negatively because I can do my business in 3 hours a day if I need to. And so all the more reason to build out a team where you're not trading your time for money anymore. But it is a non-negotiable for me. So because I don't have childcare before school or after school, most of that is a choice because I want to spend time with my kids during that time. Then I can't do my workouts in the morning. They don't like going in the afternoon. They complain. They just get annoyed because I can take them to the gym. They just don't want to go. So the odds of me being able to do workouts consistently after school and bring them with me is much less when I have to fight and battle them on it. And so the best time to do it, the most consistent time I have to do it, is either like a 9 o'clock class or a 12 o'clock class. So once I've done that, once I blocked out my schedule, then I really have 3 to 4 hours a day that's focused on business. And so I prioritize the things in business that are going to move the business forward. It's kind of forced this only paying attention to the top 5 or 10% of activities in the business that grows the business and everything else can kind of go by the wayside, or I can delegate it out to a team member. So really prioritizing the things, because for me, working out isn't about results. And it took me a long time to get to this point. In fact, again, if you've listened to me at any point or you've watched any of the videos from 2+ years ago, I was about 40 pounds heavier than I am now. Because I was wearing my trauma, I was wearing my stress. I had really bad eating habits because to me, eating was how I curbed my anxiety, which was out of control. So I tend to experience anxiety in my chest and in my stomach. And when I would overeat, it would push against the muscles in my stomach to kind of give me a little bit of relief from the anxiety. But obviously that's not healthy for your body to be eating at that level. I was addicted to sugar, right? Like I was constantly craving. I was going to the pantry for comfort and emotional comfort, not because I was hungry. I'd also like binge eat cereal at like 11 o'clock at night. I have like 1 to 2 bowls, especially during the pandemic. I was drinking a lot during the pandemic, again, to numb, to escape, to distract myself from the anxiety. And so what I find, especially with people who are trying to lose weight or get healthier, is that if you don't actually address the root cause of all these behaviors that are self-sabotaging or working against you, you can have a temporary fix of like, a fad diet or a crash diet or lose a lot of weight and you kind of yo-yo diet. It's because you're not actually addressing the root of what is causing the habit of you eating in ways that are not fueling your body. And my mom, bless her heart, has been a yo-yo dieter my whole life. So I watched her drop a ton of weight and then gain it all back. I watched her reliance on food for emotional comfort, and I learned those behaviors. And it wasn't until after I separated from my ex-husband that I actually had the bandwidth to actually start to focus in on the behaviors that were triggering me to eat unhealthy, to be sedentary. Because honestly, when you're depressed, you don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to move, right? But yet that is the thing that's going to kick hormones, the good hormones, dopamine, into your body, that's then going to give you the energy to get off the couch and start to like fix things. But it can be a battle to do the simplest of things, which leads me into like the second thing that I did was focus on understanding almost like hormones, not estrogen, testosterone, but more so the hormones of stress, the hormones of feeling good, so that I could chemically control my body. Right? Now, some of that is to say, if you have mental health disorders, you're going to want to go to a psychiatrist to figure out if it's chemical or environmental, right? Because if it's chemical, you may need medicine or, focus on foods that are going to provide any sort of chemical imbalance that you have. For me, it was mostly environmental and situational, where my anxiety and depression was, being in a toxic marriage, pandemic, all that kind of stuff. And so when I really started to understand cortisol as a stress hormone, dopamine as a happy hormone, I started to research ways to get that naturally. And I would just start simply with what's one thing I can do today to either lower my cortisol or increase dopamine. So it really was like baby steps, sometimes crawling. And especially when you're in a really deep, dark place, it's not an instant fix. The instant fix is like drugs, alcohol, numbing, escaping, it's just the behaviors that aren't conducive to you having a long-term lifestyle change, which oftentimes may be what it takes. So for me specifically, it was getting outside. I don't know if you have anxiety, but when you tend to be out in nature doesn't trigger a whole lot of stress unless there's like a tornado, fun living in the South. But trees don't cause you stress. They're not putting out a vibration. I'm very energetically sensitive to other people. Like I pick up on vibes of other people, or you may experience that too. If you have a client who's really stressed out or who's really ramped up, that like you're drained at the end of it, you may be sensitive to other people, in which case you need a lot more time alone without that stimuli. And a lot of it for me, especially having young kids, was I was constantly being touched or talked to or just overstimulated, that I never really gave myself a break or like required time until I was at DEFCON 5, like in my lowest of low moments, right after we moved to Tennessee and I was still married and my marriage was really just hitting rock bottom. I was trying to go to mommy rehab. I was trying to go to rehab before I had a problem, but those don't really exist. But I was about to drop $30,000 to go away for a month to a rehab, but without an addiction. And I was just like, I don't know what you do before you get to the addiction. I mean, I'd rather not go down the addiction path, but at this point, if that's what's going to get me into this like rehab place, I'll do it. Um, Luckily, that didn't end up happening. I shut the business down instead, honestly. And so I started to look at what are the basics of basics when you're really struggling. And my team and I do a really good job of this, is that we will text each other for accountability. We have a list of 10 self-care things that you can do that are the basics of self-care, because sometimes it feels even impossible to do those things. So like taking a shower. Sometimes that's the win for the day and all you can do, but it is a part of your personal hygiene that is a good basic self-care routine, especially if you have young children. Brushing your teeth, getting outside, going for a 10-minute walk, drinking water, eating a healthy meal. Like, it can be broken down to be that simple, especially when you're really struggling. Because, trying to think of like, I'm going to lose 50 pounds and I'm going to work out every single day and I'm going to change my diet completely. And like, that can seem really heavy and overwhelming. And we actually have to condition our brain to look for evidence that we can do the things that we say we're going to do. So when we have these big goals that seem really like overwhelming, or they're going to take months or years to get to, our brain, like as far as motivation and seeking that dopamine hit, is just going to kind of peter out over time. But if you start with small habits that are doable, you will start to train your brain that when you say you're going to do something, it's going to happen. So even if it's, I'm going to get up when my alarm goes off, right? Mel Robbins has the 5-second rule, I think is the name of her book. It's a great book for motivation, to understanding like the 5 seconds you have between a thought and a desire happening before your brain tries to convince you don't do it. So highly recommend that book. But yeah, it's finding small things that you can do consistently to build up the confidence that you're good to do whatever it is that you say you're going to do. And so sometimes we have to start with those small wins to recondition our brain that we actually can do the things that we set out to do, rather than I'm going to lose 50 pounds. And then like 9 months later, you're 35 pounds down. You're like, it's not working. I give up. And then you go back to the old ways. It's retraining your brain on small things to give it evidence of positive things that you can build on from there. And then thirdly was changing the way that I talked to and about myself in my head, out in the world. And I catch it so quickly with our students, and my students can attest to this. I will call you out when you say like, oh my God, I'm so dumb. Or, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. What are you putting out there into the world? Like, stop being so self-deprecating. Would you say that to your kids? Maybe you would. Maybe that was said to you. And that's the thing, is that voice, that negative voice, that condescending voice, that really critical voice is not yours. It is not yours. You were born as a baby having two fears: fear of sounds or loud noises, and fear of falling. Everything else was a learned behavior and a conditioned behavior. I don't know. I mean, I guess some people are motivated by how shitty they feel about themselves. Pardon my language, children. But I have found that is actually a really poor motivator. All right. And I worked on it, and I was just so tired of like beating myself up in my own head and like looking at my body going like, ew. And so now just kind of what that looks like inside of my head, if you want to crack open the Lashpreneur's brain, is I'm actually the biggest cheerleader for myself. So if I'm going through a hard time, I just went through a hard season last month where I was just like emotionally struggling a lot. And I was like, wow, you're really taking on a lot. Or when I get really frustrated with, say, my ex-husband and parenting of our children, I go, man, you guys have been through some stuff. And it sounds like, it seemed to have triggered you. Or if I default to like anger on things, I'm like, wow, you have really effective protection mechanisms for what you went through over the past decade, right? Like, I'm validating myself every step of the way, not shaming myself of like, I shouldn't feel this way, or I should be able to get past this. Your thoughts and your feelings can be really good information for you, and not the meaning or the story that's there. But if I'm feeling triggered or I'm feeling emotion, that's my opportunity to get curious as to why. Like, what is really going on there that I'm experiencing such a strong emotional reaction to something? Generally speaking, that's something inner child work can help with, or trauma work, because when we have an emotional response that is not necessarily appropriate for a situation. So if all of a sudden you look at your bank account and you go into like full panic or terror where you don't even want to look at it again, it's probably not an appropriate response for it because you're looking at it and making a story out of it. Because really the numbers on the screen are just pixels. It's the meaning you're placing on those numbers. I can't pay my bills. I suck at this. I'll never be good enough. Who am I to do this? Like all of those stories and beliefs that aren't serving you. So even when I've had really tough financial months where, here's the thing, guys, there have been months when we've been $50,000 in debt. And then there's been months when we've done $80,000 in sales. So to me, after having done this long enough, I'm like, money will always come, right? I'm already working a business and learning a business and growing a business in direction. And sometimes that works and sometimes it sucks. But what I've learned is even when I'm looking at, say, our sales for the month and they're nowhere near where I want to be, and maybe I'm freaked out about like, how am I going to make payroll the next pay period? I'm like, but I still have 2 weeks to figure it out. What good does like panicking about it now and painting out, shutting down my business and painting out what it's going to be like to live on food stamps? Like that doesn't help. It's like, what can I be doing now so that I don't keep having this result? Not staying in the result or quitting, but really, how can I figure this out? And having the confidence that like, I'm going to figure it out. It may not look the way that I want it to, but what life does. So speaking to yourself, just first and foremost, be present to the thoughts in your head. And that's part of self-awareness, is just understanding like we have such conditioned responses to everything in life. And if you've been around for 2 decades or more, you have a lot of evidence and a lot of like that trigger and a belief or a thought that comes in, and you can change those things. Every thought you have is a conditioned response, and you can change it when you're present to it. So the next time you feel stressed or scared or angry, ask yourself, what is my body trying to tell me? What is my brain trying to tell me? Chances are it probably doesn't feel safe. So whatever it is that you're looking to externally to feel safe, feeling safe is an internal job, right? Very rarely are you actively in a dangerous situation where your life is threatened or your physical harm is imminent, right? Yes, there are those experiences. And if you feel that way, you may have a trauma response. But for the most part, the fear that we feel is perceived, right? It's not actual reality. So if you wake up in the middle of the night in a panicked state, afraid of everything, you're spiraling in anxiety, remember that you are actually in your bed, in your house, and that, as long as somebody's not like choking you at that moment, whatever you want to do at night, chances are that you're not actually in danger. It is the thoughts and the fear about what might happen in the future that is creating that panic or that anxiety. But at that moment, which is the only moment that matters, you are safe. So you can just keep, and this is what I do when I have those moments where I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like worried about all the world's problems that I can't freaking do anything about at 3 a.m. I go, I am safe. I am safe. I am in my bed. I can feel the sheets on my feet. Okay, who am I kidding? I have my feet kicked out at night. I can feel the pillow. I can feel the wind from the fan going. Like, get present to what you feel in your body, not the panic, but like grounding you in the moment. Because 99% of our fears are coming from a belief or a thought that hasn't actually happened yet, right? And anxiety is trying to control all of which is out of our control. The only thing you have control over is yourself in the present moment. We can influence and impact things around us, but ultimately we can't control anyone or anything outside of us. So that is really having an understanding and a deep dive of how the brain works, how to control my thoughts so that I can actually start to feel more of the experiences that I want to feel, has been the game changer for me to have the life that I want, to feel the way that I want to feel, even if the external results don't match what I want. But I'm less dependent on that. I'm less connected or attached to an end result because I work on the internal feeling. And guess what? And that's kind of what I was saying about working out. Actually, we did this a couple podcast episodes ago, where if you get detached from the end result, you just get to experience the experiences you want to have and really work on that internal game of feeling what you want to feel. And ironically, and this is kind of a law of attraction thing, you start to get the results externally that you always wanted. But white knuckling your way through life isn't going to get you closer to the results that you want. So in summary, the 3 things that really help me take control of my life, really help manage my anxiety, help me to lose weight, be consistent in taking care of my health and myself, and be thriving and really, really mentally strong, are prioritizing my own self-care over everything and everyone else. Because if this ship goes down, everybody goes down. Can I get an amen, moms? Focusing on the basics of self-care on days that I just don't feel like doing anything, and changing the way that I think and talk about myself, both in my head and publicly or externally. All right, that's all I've got for you today, guys. Have a good one.